My father, on the other hand, his family comes from Horse Cave, Kentucky. At least my grandmother did. My grandmother was the product of rape. Her mother was a servant in a house, in a white man's house, and he felt that part of her duty was whatever he wanted. And he raped my grandmother and my great grandmother. Laura Garnett was her name, God bless her. And there was my grandmother. And she had a terrible time in Kentucky because if you were to see my grandmother, you would not really know who or what she was. She identified, obviously as a Black woman. But sometimes you would look at her, she looked like a First Nation person. She looked like whoever she happened to be around. In some circles, people might think she was a white person. Other people think she was a Black person. So as a child, especially, with the circumstances of her situation, she really wasn't accepted anywhere. And then later her mother remarried, and that person, according to my grandmother, felt like the mother and the daughter were a package deal. And my grandmother thought that her mother would not protect her. So she basically ran away with the first person leaving town. However, her mother did allow her to marry. She was 16 years old. And she married a man named Everett Johnson, who was a player in the Negro Leagues. Negro Leagues would play in baseball and leave town. So at 16 years old, she leaves Horse Cave, Kentucky, with the baseball team leaving town. Their next stop is Duluth, Minnesota, if you can even wrap your head around that. And my grandmother had 6 children, a set of twins, by the time she was 24 years old. My father was 8 years old, the oldest, when his baseball father walked down the hill like he was going to work one day and never came back. And left my grandmother, who basically had less than an 8th grade education, with 6 children under 8 years old, in Duluth, Minnesota, by herself. She had a couple of options. She could take in laundry. She could cook in kitchens. She could be a prostitute. She did 2 of those 3 things, not the prostitute part. And all of her children then, especially her boys, the oldest, everyone had to try to work to help with the family. And they had a very hard time during the Depression. My father, when he was 8 years old, went to work in a steel mill. Before school, before grade school, he would go pick up scraps or whatever for whatever pennies he could get. Go to school, come home, go back, come home, and do it over again. And so my father at 8 years old was a man of the family. And when my father was an adult, and all of this family, just fast forward, everybody turned out great. Everybody that wanted to be successful, which was all of them, they all had successful families that all worked out, even though they were basically left to perish. But when my father was 40 years old, his brothers and sisters were still giving him Father's Day cards. So they were, we have 2 very different examples. And all of our family, our parents raised us. I use the words, I am my father's oldest son. And what I mean by that is we were not raised with any gender roles. We were raised to be the best human beings that we know how to be. We were raised to be strong and have our own integrity and to be responsible for yourself and be responsible and respectful for your family. And they set that bar for us and they set it high. And I think that we did a really good job, the best that we can. We could never match them, but I know that they were proud of us.